to do something for the people who come along to the quay, which is probably round about 20 to 30 people every week, that we wanted to do something as a one-off, as a Christmas meal. So actually to do it as a sit-down meal in the hall downstairs as a one-time on the 16th of December. To do that, we need lots more people to be involved than are normally involved in running the quay as a takeaway service on a Friday. We can do that with 4 people. We reckon that in order to do this properly and to have people able to be in the kitchen serving up, people serving tables, people at the doors, all of that will mean that we need a minimum of 10 people in order to make it work on the evening of the 16th of December. So we need people to be willing to come and to help out on this occasion if we're going to make it viable. So what we will do is we will assess over the next week if you would like to be involved, if you're able to help out in connection with this. Speak to one of the members of the service group who are mostly around today. You can speak to Alison or Blessing or Sheena or Val or myself, any one of us. Let us know if you think this is something that you could contribute to. And next Sunday afternoon, we will make a decision on whether we have enough people available to make this a viable option for us to run that event on the 16th of December. Otherwise, we will default back to just providing the usual takeaway service that we do. So if you could think about that and let us know if this is something that you believe that you can contribute to, then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Brian. Let's gather together in prayer. King of Kings, Host of Hosts, today we're reminded that you are above all. You rule. The whole world is your kingdom. Today we turn our thoughts to Jeremiah, a young man who doubted his ability to undertake the task you called him to. We ask that you forgive us for the times in the past where we, like Jeremiah, have run from your call. Sometimes we simply doubt the gifts you've given us. We forget that you know us and what we're capable of in more ways than we will ever know. And that's overwhelming. At times it's frightening. Loving God, may our hearts be made worthy to be called your children, to follow in your footsteps. May we go where you call us to go. May we speak the word that you give us through the power of your Holy Spirit. May your words be upon our lips. May your grace dwell in our hearts, so that we may pluck up and pull down, destroy and overthrow, build and plant, as you command. Amen. Let's rise if we're able and sing our opening praise to the Lord. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Worship his holy name.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, O my soul. Worship his holy name.
So the very observant among you this morning will spot that we are all wearing name badges. I've got one up the front here and I can see the wee white labels virtually everywhere in the congregation. Some of you are already trying to hide them. I have a selection of badges that I seem to have picked up, or name badges that I seem to have picked up over the years. So I thought I would just share one or two of them this morning. This one is from the Aberdeen University, Gary Smith Divinity Student.
They spelled my name wrong.
That's a whole other story. There we go. So there's one. This is one. Gary Smith, Scotland, CG1FG3. I have no idea what that means anymore. But this was from a Baptist youth conference that I went to back in 1998. I think that one was. Let's have a look, see what else is in here. There you go. Mr. Gary Smith. Baptist Union National Youth Worker. That was one of the many titles I had when I worked for the Baptist Union in Scotland. And this was a badge that I got for attending council, Baptist Union Council in 2000. There you go. Let's have a look at here. Well, there we go. This is, yeah, you'll probably laugh at this one. Growing Pains, Gary Smith. That probably says it all. That was for an SG thing I was at once upon a time. There we go. Oh, Gary Smith, Baptist Union of Scotland delegate. That's probably from a different assembly. And let's see what else is in here. Gary Smith, Deep Impact Organising Committee. There you go. And it's even got on the back of it what I've got to do as well and where I've got to be. So, and that's just some of the badges that I seem to have picked up over the while, just in case I should ever forget my name, obviously, and just in case anybody else wanted to know it. The advantage of us all wearing badges today is that we can now see and therefore remember people's names, or maybe find out their name for the first time. Wearing a badge is a good way of us getting to know each other. It's not quite so embarrassing, or it's a little bit embarrassing if you forget to take it off and are still wearing it in a coffee shop or anywhere else you might go today. So do remember if you're wearing it. It helps us to know each other's names. We're going to read in a moment from Jeremiah 1. And one of the things that we discover in Jeremiah 1 is that God knows our names. That was the title of a song by a Christian singer called Tommy Walker. It's a song that's sung in many churches, and some of the lyrics of the song include, I have a maker, he formed my heart. Before even time began, my life was in his hands. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls. He hears me when I call. The songwriter got the idea for this song from Jeremiah 1 in the Bible, the passage that we're going to think about a little this morning. The story begins with God speaking to a young boy called Jeremiah. God says, before I shaped you in the womb, I knew all about you. Before you saw the light of day, I had holy plans for you. A prophet to the nations. That's what I had in mind for you. Jeremiah heard God. He understood what God wanted him to do, but perhaps unsurprisingly, he was afraid. So he answered God, saying, hold on a minute. Look at me. I don't know anything. I'm only a boy. But God came back. Don't say I'm only a boy. I'll tell you where to go, and you'll go there. I'll tell you what to say, and you'll say it. Don't be afraid of a soul. I'll be right there looking after you. And then we're told that God reached out, touched Jeremiah's mouth and said, "Look, I've just put my words in your mouth, hand delivered. See what I've done. I've given you a job to do among nations and governments." A red letter day. God had big plans for Jeremiah. God may have big plans for us. He knows our name. He knew us before we were even born, and He had a plan for our lives. When God says that we are to do something, we shouldn't say, "I'm only a child." Don't be afraid to do what God tells us to do, because God's promised that He will be with us with whatever it is that He asks us to do. Let's listen again to the story, and Annabelle's going to come and read it for us as it's recorded in the Bible.
The word of the Lord came to me, saying, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as prophets of the nations." "Alas, Sovereign Lord," I said, "I do not know how to speak. I am too young." But the Lord said to me, "Do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to, and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you," declares the Lord. Then the Lord reached out His hand and touched my mouth, and said to me, "I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms, to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant."
Thank you, Annabelle. The primary students can head through for their activities in the lounge with their leaders. This badge here that reminds me I was a divinity student once upon a time, back in the late 80s. When I started my divinity studies, I had no idea what I would end up doing at the end of the 4 years, but I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was not going to become a minister. That was not for me. Well, quite a number of years later, it's still not something I feel comfortable with. Brian shared a few moments ago about plans for a Christmas meal with the homeless that come along to the quay on a Friday evening. Helping with the homeless on a Friday evening was not something I would have considered doing before coming to Terrace. I probably would have steered myself away from that kind of opportunity, much as I would have steered myself away from beggars on Union Street. Not something I felt comfortable with. I always knew that upfront stuff on Sundays was well out of my comfort zone, and it doesn't get any easier. I don't like talking in front of large groups or even smaller groups. It's always been that way. When I was at school, for some reason, I did drama as an O-level. And that was fine when I could do the behind-the-scenes stuff, like stage management, sound, lighting, even props, but well, never quite costumes. Anything behind the scenes was better than acting on the stage. But But these are all things that God has asked me to do. I wonder how many of us are a little backwards when it comes to going forward with what it is that God asks us to do. I wonder how many of us doubt our abilities when it comes to being asked by God to do something. That was certainly the case for Jeremiah in our reading which Annabel read a moment ago. God tells Jeremiah that he's been chosen to be a prophet to the nations. And Jeremiah responds with excuses. I don't know how to speak. I'm too young. He obviously doesn't like the excuses for not doing what God asks. When God asked Moses to go speak to Pharaoh about releasing the people of Israel from slavery, Moses blurts out that could not be a good idea from God because he stuttered terribly. He would be a very poor choice of spokesperson for God. Gideon, the judge, also made excuses to God as to why he shouldn't go and save God's people from the Midian invaders. God said he would give him the strength. All Gideon had to do was go, but Gideon says, well, his hand's weakest in all Israel, and he's the least important member of his family. And when God still asks him to go, Gideon twice used sheep's fleeces to try and give him an excuse to not do what God asked. Then there was the prophet Isaiah. When he was confronted with a vision from God sitting on his throne with a robe that filled the temple and angels around him, Isaiah felt unworthy. When he heard the angels singing, felt the whole place trembling and saw the temple filled with smoke, Isaiah made the excuse that he was a man of unclean lips. He felt there was no way that God could use or should use someone like him. That's just Jeremiah and 3 other characters from the Bible who doubted their abilities when confronted by God about doing something for him. But all those encounters, and especially Jeremiah's, tells us that God doesn't care about ability. It's as if Jeremiah says to God, I'm not qualified, and God responds, I never said you were. Because God was aware of Jeremiah's lack of abilities, he could have found someone who was more naturally qualified. God didn't say to Jeremiah that Jeremiah really knew how to talk. He doesn't agree with him about his lack of age. Instead, God points out